in our previous lesson we talked about how on the 20th of June 1789 the French monarch King Louis XVI had the National Assembly's meeting hall locked up so as to prevent the people of France from assembling and discussing against the monarchical rule. We learned that anti-monarchical sentiments were brewing up in the masses' minds, and it ultimately took the shape of the storming of the Bastille prison that happened on July 14, 1789. We learned that that particular event, as in the storming of the Bastille prison, officially marked the outbreak of the French Revolution. Now, the storming of Bastille happened at that point of time when the French masses were already suffering due to poverty, hunger, food shortages. After the storming of Bastille happened the Great Fear. And it was at this point of time that it rumored that the lords of the manors were deciding and planning to burn down all crops and starve the revolutionaries started spreading among the masses like wildfire. Now the revolutionaries also retaliated almost instantaneously by burning down the mansions and also the documents that recorded the taxes that they were supposed to pay. So this was a time when political tension in France was peaking to a very high extent. And now in this lesson we will begin this discussion by trying to understand how the French monarch Louis XVI responded to this political crisis in France. Now the storming of Bastille, as we have discussed, was a very crucial turning point in human history itself. Because with the outbreak of the French Revolution, the monarch Louis XVI now realized that it was not possible for him to hold out against the revolutionaries for long. Because the power over Paris now went outside his hand. He was no longer having the control over the people of France. While the monarch was quite reluctant to give the people of France all the power, he had to do something. So what do you think he did? We learned that it was the National Assembly that was now gaining huge popularity among the masses, because the National Assembly was tasked to give France a democratic constitution, because the National Assembly showed the masses a streak of hope of overturning the power structure in France. Which is why the king was now compelled to give the National Assembly an official recognition. So the monarch now granted recognition to the National Assembly. And along with that, the monarch also asked the members of the first estate, as in the clergy, and the second estate, as in the aristocracy and nobility, to join the National Assembly. And in this way, this National Assembly was supposed to give recognition and acknowledgement to all the people of France. It was no longer supposed to remain restricted to the third estate alone, because when all the members of the first and the second estate would also join the National Assembly, it would now represent all the people of France. So this was now supposed to be a representative body of all the people of France, irrespective of their social status, irrespective of the wealth that they possessed. Now we have talked a lot about the bourgeoisie who were inspired by the Enlightenment philosophers and their very radical ideas. Now the National Assembly was in no way willing to have the rule of the monarch as the supreme law in the land. We have also learnt about the third estate and how it was founded on feudal privileges and discriminations. And to this end, on August 4, 1789, the National Assembly now passed a decree. Now what was this decree supposed to do? Well, this decree was to abolish the feudal system. So the feudal system that was founded on oppression of the members of the third estate, that was founded on discriminations against the poor sections of the society, was supposed to be abolished from the French society. And at the same time, this decree also compelled the clergy to give up its privileges, because the clergy also lived off a lot of privileges simply by the virtue of belonging to the first estate, and they now had to give up the privileges that they have been enjoying for centuries on end. And this decree also maintained that the church lands were supposed to be confiscated. Now, in one of our lessons, we have also talked about how the church also imposed several taxes on the members of the third estate, and one such tax was the tithe. Now, all these taxes were also abolished. So, this decree was supposed to end all sorts of privileges, all sorts of discriminations from the society. And here, if you follow, it reads abolition de privileges, which means abolition of privileges. So this was supposed to put an end to the feudal system and all these privileges that this system entailed. Now, the National Assembly, as we have learnt, had gotten the official recognition of the monarch. And at the same time, members of the other two estates, as in the first and the second estate, had joined this body. Now, this gave the National Assembly an official stature. And finally, it was on August 9, 1789 that the National Assembly now became the National Constituent Assembly. Here you can see a meeting of the National Constituent Assembly, and this was the logo or the symbol of this newly formed National Constituent Assembly. But I'm sure you are questioning, why was this word constituent included in this National Assembly? As in, how is the word constituent of any significance in this regard? Let us now try to find out answers to this question. Before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. When was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen adopted? Was it adopted on August 4, 1789, August 26, 1789, July 8, 1789, or on June 9, 1789? Which of these do you think is the correct answer? Well, the correct answer is August 26, 1789. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was adopted on August 26, 1789. Now, the National Constituent Assembly was tasked to frame a democratic and liberal constitution for France. Now, let me tell you something very important in this regard. When any body or any council is called constituent, it is tasked to form a constitution. It is because of this task that a body gets the term constituent ascribed to itself. And for this reason as well, the National Assembly became the National Constituent Assembly in 1789. Now, this National Constituent Assembly was supposed to give France not just a liberal constitution but a democratic one, because by democracy we mean that all the people of France would now have their say in the political affairs of the country, and by liberal we mean that this constitution would safeguard the liberties and individual rights of the French citizens. Now, France had been a kingdom for many centuries. It was not very easy to suddenly change the system of government and make it a democratic and liberal one. For all these centuries, it was the French monarchs' say that was the final law and rule of the land. So, it was not very easy to supplant this system of governance. And when the National Constituent Assembly was tasked to form a democratic and liberal constitution for France, it now had gotten a very huge responsibility. Now for this, the Constituent Assembly was taking time to gather all its ideas and to formulate them in a formal coherent shape. Now finally, it was on August 26, 1789 that the National Constituent Assembly of France adopted the historic Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Now this was a very crucial document for the people of France because, as the name suggests, this document now declared the rights that the man and the French citizens were now supposed to enjoy in the country. Because all this while the citizens had been divested of all rights, all civil liberties. And it was finally with the adoption of this Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen that the citizens were supposed to enjoy certain liberties and individual rights. Now another thing that we must mention in this regard is that while we see that it was called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, we do not find any mention of women here. Well, keep this point in mind because we will be taking this up when we discuss the role of women in the French Revolution. But as of now, let us now get into discussing what this Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen held for the French citizens. Now in the French society, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was very significant because it assured individual rights for the citizens. Now this document was inspired by the thoughts and ideas of the Enlightenment philosophers, and the ideas of liberty, equality and fraternity were given importance here. And along with giving political rights to the citizens, they were also given civil liberties just by the virtue of being born. And these cannot be taken away from any individual. These include the rights to life, liberty and property, and along with that, equality before law, freedom of speech and expression, and protection from arrest without reason. So this was really a historic document, and this Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen formed the bedrock for the French Constitution of 1791. Now we are not to assume that the outbreak of the French Revolution and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen meant the end of the revolution, because this was a time when crises and problems and turmoils in France did not come to an end. Now the French society was embroiled in several kinds of issues. Firstly, there was acute food shortages. The masses were rebelling against the government. And then the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and Citizen came up, but someone needed to take care of the administration. Because formerly, administration was under the control of the French monarchy. Now, what do you think happened with the French administration after the storming of Bastille and the formal outbreak of the French Revolution? Well, a new revolutionary municipal body called the Paris Commune took over the administration of Paris in the year 1789. So from this we can understand that it was not the French monarch Louis XVI who was in charge of the administration of Paris. Because the storming of Bastille not just meant the end and the demolition of that prison, but it also curtailed a lot of power and authority that the French monarch had been enjoying all this while. And so this was the office of the Paris Commune. Now at this point of time, the French monarch Louis XVI along with his family lived in the royal residence that was the Palace of Versailles. Now the Palace of Versailles is situated far away from Paris. But the revolutionaries wanted to keep the monarch under their control. What did they think of doing? They now went to the Palace of Versailles and ordered the monarch to come back to Paris. And the monarch had to agree to do so, because the monarch no longer enjoyed absolute control and power over the people. The revolutionaries were gaining power and influence, and the monarch was very well aware of the same. which is why the monarch was now compelled to come back to his royal residence at Paris, which was the Tuileries Palace. And so this is the king, as you can see here, in his royal residence at Paris. Now his stay at this royal residence at Paris, that is at the Palace of Tuileries, was more of a house arrest, because all these revolutionaries constantly kept him under their check. So what we need to understand from this is that power over the administration of not just Paris but of different places in France now went beyond the control of the French monarch. Now the storming of Bastille was quite unorganized, in the sense that it was not stormed by a very organized army. At this point of time, the revolutionaries were not very well organized, which is why the National Constituent Assembly also thought of organizing the rebellious militia. How did that happen? Now the rebellious militia of Paris was now organized into a citizens' force, and this was called the National Guard. Now the National Guard had a lot of responsibilities to take care of. Firstly, it had to take charge of law and order in not just Paris but throughout France. And at the same time, it also had to shield itself from any attack from the French Royal Army. Now many soldiers from the French army also switched over to the side of the revolutionaries, and they joined the National Guard. And over time, this National Guard became the military support for the cause of the revolutionaries against the French monarchy. So the National Constituent Assembly, as it was tasked to draft a constitution for France, finally did so in the year 1791. So it finally drafted the Constitution of France in this year. Now it is imperative on our part to find out what this Constitution of France meant and entailed. Now this was the first time that France was having a constitution, because in monarchies we generally don't see the existence of constitutions. Constitutions means that to a certain extent or to a great extent power shall remain at the disposal of the people. And this Constitution of France of 1791 now instituted a constitutional monarchy in France. What does this mean? While on the one hand, monarchy would not be abolished completely, its power would be curtailed and reduced to a great extent. And ultimate power or sovereignty, that is ultimate political power over the land, would now remain at the disposal of the constitution or the people. So this constitutional monarchy was a kind of check and balance on the power of the monarchy. So while on the one hand the people would enjoy their power in France, the monarch shall remain as the nominal head or the titular head of the state. Now why do you think this was done? Because the monarch had been the symbol of power for many centuries in not just France but throughout Europe. And suddenly removing this symbol of power shall create confusion among the masses, which is why the National Constituent Assembly did not remove the monarch altogether. Instead, it chose to strip the monarch of his absolute power. And to the National Assembly, it did not matter who remained at the head of the state. All that mattered was the ultimate power shall now be at the disposal of the French masses. So with this, we come to an end of our discussion that helped us understand various events that followed the storming of Bastille and the Great Fear. In a subsequent lesson, we will be taking this course of discussion, as in the course of the French Revolution, even further to understand how the French monarchy was finally responding to this system of governance. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.